This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
You're on.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Bruchim Habayim. Tonight's show is being sponsored by Mr. Sam Daniel, who has sponsored graciously our Shiurim a number of times already, and we are very grateful for him for sponsoring this last supper before Pesach. And on behalf of Hokila, we wish him and his whole mishpacha much future success, much continued success. Ad B'yas Kol Tzedek.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so Mirz Hashem, Friday night, which is the first night of Pesach, we have many mitzvos that we're going to be performing, many mitzvos d'oraisa. There are different counts of the mitzvos. In fact, we have a tradition going back to the Vilna Gaon that the night of Pesach we perform a total of 64 mitzvos. If you add all the mitzvos d'oraisa, all the mitzvos d'Rabbanan, all the minhagim, all the various good practices that we have the opportunity to perform the night of Pesach, we have 64 mitzvos. The Chassam Sofer writes something that is absolutely astounding. In Choshen Mishpat, the Shalas Teshuvos Chassam Sofer writes, he's discussing a certain city in Italy called Trieste. And on the one hand, the Chassam Sofer compliments the way that city operates, how they're very big Balei Chasadim and Balei Tzedakah. Nevertheless, the Chassam Sofer has a certain critique of the way they bake their matzos. And that is, the ones who are baking the matzos in the city of Trieste are Ne'arim, they're people who are unlearned, people who are not familiar with the halachos of matzah. And the Chassam Sofer has very sharp words against this practice. He says, first of all, he quotes from the Arizal, and the Arizal tells us that anyone who is careful not to eat even a mashahu of chametz, anyone who is careful not to eat even one iota of chametz the night of Pesach, will not sin the entire year. That's what the Chassam Sofer writes. He doesn't tell you where he gets it from, but it's well known. This was the statement of the Arizal. The Arizal teaches us, anyone who is careful even from a mashahu of chametz, even from the smallest iota of chametz, will not sin the entire year. Says the Chassam Sofer, if you look on the underlined part of number 1, Mitzvahs aseh shalachilas matzah mishumeres. The positive command of eating shmura matzah, B'leil Pesach, the night of Pesach, Hi yechida nisheres lanu, is the only mitzvah that remains for us, mikol mitzvos achila shebachol haTorah, from all the mitzvos of eating in the whole Torah. In other words, if one would go through the 248 positive commandments of the Torah, many of the positive commandments involve eating. There is only one mitzvah that involves eating that still applies today, and that is eating matzah. Ein lanu Pesach, we no longer have the carbon Pesach. V'loi kachim, we no longer have a mitzvah to eat karbanos, right? In the time that the Beis Hamikdash stood, there was a mitzvah, the oraisa, to partake of kachim, a carbon shlamim, sometimes even other karbanos and carbon chatos. Nevertheless, we have no carbon Pesach today. We have no kachim today. Lo truma, even kohanim are no longer able to eat truma. V'lo ma'aser sheni, we're not able to bring up ma'aser sheni to Yerushalayim and in Yerushalayim. We only have one mitzvah that is relevant, that is connected to eating. Rak mitzvah achas mishana l'shana. We only have one mitzvah the entire year that involves eating, and it's only once the whole year. And if we blow that one, and not only if we miss it, but all the more so if chas v'shalom, the matzah is not baked properly, and instead of it being matzah, it's actually chametz, just imagine what a lost opportunity, what a terrible sin it is.
Right,
so,
eating on your Erev Yom Kippur doesn't count?
Okay, good question. Very good, Josh. So again, what the Chassam Sofer says is that of all the mitzvahs in the entire Torah, we only have one mitzvah today that involves eating, and that is achilas matzah. There's no mitzvah of achilas kachim, there's no mitzvah of eating truma, there's no mitzvah of eating ma'aser sheni. There's only one mitzvah that involves eating, and that's matzah. So you got to take advantage of it. So the problem with the words of the Chassam Sofer are that there are many mitzvahs that do involve eating other than matzah. For instance, Josh asked, according to many opinions, there is a mitzvah aseh de oraisa to eat on Erev Yom Kippur. according to certain Rishonim, there is a mitzvah d'oraisa to eat on Shabbos. I would ask, and these questions are raised by Rav Shimshon Pinkus in his Sefer Sichos, Rav Shimshon David Pinkus, Zecher Tzaddik Levracha, and he asked, what's the Chassam Sofer talking about? How could the Chassam Sofer tell us we only have one mitzvah today that involves eating matzah? It's not true. He asked, what about eating Erev Yom Kippur? He asked, what about eating kachim? And I would ask, we have a mitzvah saseh d'oraisa according to everyone to eat a kazayas in the sukkah the night of Sukkot. So what does the Chassam Sofer mean? We have one mitzvah that remains today to eat matzah. It's not true. We have many mitzvahs. Eating on Shabbos, eating Erev Yom Kippur, eating in the sukkah. So what's so special about eating matzah? Okay. We have an amazing Gemara, the Gemara in Gittin. Okay? The Gemara in Gittin says that while the man has to be the authority figure in the house, maybe we should turn off the tape.
No.
It doesn't, we don't have two captains, right? If you have two captains guiding the ship's going to drown. There's a captain and there's a first mate. And the Gemara feels the man is the authority figure in the house. However, says the Gemara, don't impose ema yisera. Don't impose excessive fear in the home. Why? Says the Gemara, you know what's going to happen if you impose too much fear in the home? If your supper is not ready on time and you're going to carry on how, you're home already for 3 seconds and the supper's not on the table, you better watch out, because there was somebody by the name of Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel who imposed excessive fear on the home. And one time, his wife was preparing the supper and something happened to the chicken. It became a treifa. Or actually what the Gemara says is it was Ever Menachai. She didn't have time to shecht. She just took off a piece from the living chicken. She threw it in the pot. It was Ever Menachai. And she fed it to him because she knew what was going to happen if 7:30 came and the supper wasn't ready.
Who's liable, Rabbi?
What?
Who's liable? Is she liable?
No, the husband's liable.
Well,
see.
She's liable. She better make
So the Gemara says a person should not impose excessive fear on the household because it's going to lead to no good. Okay. And what happened? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, his wife fed him Ever Menachai. Ask the Gemara the following question. What? Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel ate Ever Menachai? But there's a famous principle in Shas that God does not even let the animals of tzaddikim sin. We know the donkey of Reb Pinchas ben Yair, God protected the donkey of Reb Pinchas ben Yair that the donkey should not eat anything forbidden. So if God even protects the animals of tzaddikim, certainly the tzaddik himself, Hashem would not allow the tzaddik to eat treif. So how could the Gemara tell us that Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel was force-fed Ever Menachai, but we have a principle, God protects even the animals of tzaddikim, so certainly God protects the tzaddikim themselves? Answers the Gemara, his wife didn't feed it to him, she tried to, but he didn't end up eating it. Okay. But this is the principle. The principle is, God protects even the animals of tzaddikim, certainly the tzaddikim themselves.
Did she survive?
What? Okay. Says Rabbeinu Tam, what does this mean that God protects the tzaddikim from sin? Look throughout the pages of Shas, we find many examples, many illustrations of Amoraim, of great sages, who sinned. Right? The Gemara Masechta Shabbos tells us that on Friday night one is not allowed to learn by the candlelight. Gezero shemayate. You may tilt the candle to allow you to see better. There was a man by the name of Rabbi Shmuel who said, I will read by the candlelight and I will make sure that I don't tilt the candle. What happened? He learned by the candlelight and he was overcome with the need to tilt the candle, and he tilted the candle and he sinned. Ask Tosfos, what do you mean? I thought God protects tzaddikim so they don't sin. Or another example is in the Gemara in Chagiga. The Gemara tells us how Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai killed an Eid Zoymim wrongfully. There was a witness who Rabbi Yehuda ben Tabai cross-examined. He felt that this witness was an Eid Zoymim, and he killed this witness unrightfully. So how could the Gemara tell us that God protects the tzaddikim and He doesn't allow them to sin? We find numerous examples of tzaddikim sinning. Says Tosfos, this rule that God protects the tzaddikim is only God protects the tzaddikim from sinning with food. But God does not protect tzaddikim that they don't sin in general. A tzaddik, he may slip up and speak lashon hara. He may slip up and eat on you and He may slip up and swear falsely. He may slip up and wear shatnez. But to eat something problematic, something questionable, that's where the Gemara's Havtacha applies. God will not allow a tzaddik to stumble when it comes to food. You hear that? In other words, if somebody in a butcher shop is messing around, is not following the halacha, God will make sure that tzaddikim don't eat that food. That's what the Gemara is telling us. Someone who's really a tzaddik, God will protect them from forbidden food, not from other sin. From chilul Shabbos, no. From killing, no. Even from the worst sins, God will not protect the tzaddikim, only from food. So now Tosfos has a question. And the question is, we find in the Gemara in Pesachim that Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba forgot, and he ate before Havdalah. Right? We know you're not allowed to eat before Havdalah. Right. According to the Arizal, you don't even drink water. But Me'ikar Hadin, you're allowed to drink water, but you're not allowed to eat. Right? You're not allowed to eat or drink anything other than water before Havdalah. That's the halacha. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba forgot, and he accidentally ate before Havdalah. How could that be? I thought Hashem protects tzaddikim from eating something forbidden. Or, Tosfos asks a question. The Gemara tells us in Masechta Rosh Hashanah how certain tzaddikim forgot and ate on a fast day. Ask Tosfos, what do you mean? I thought God protects the tzaddikim from eating improperly. Says Tosfos. Now Tosfos has to qualify. He has to split hairs. What does Tosfos say? When does God protect tzaddikim from eating something improper? That's where the food itself is a davar tameh, where the food itself is inherently problematic, something treif, something not kosher, yayin nesach, bishol akom, right? Stam yenam. When does God protect tzaddikim? God will only protect tzaddikim not from eating any time something improperly, from eating food that inherently has a problem with it. But God will not protect a tzaddik from eating kosher food at the wrong time. God will not protect the tzaddik from eating kosher food before Havdalah, from eating kosher food on Yom Kippur. Okay, so that's what Tosfos says.
It means Hashem going to protect the Jewish people, tzaddikim, to not eat taref too.
Yeah, not the Jewish people, tzaddikim. Tzaddikim. In other words, what Tosfos is learning, that the Gemara's guarantee that God will not bring takala, stumbling block to a tzaddik. God will only make sure a tzaddik does not eat something inherently problematic. But to eat something that is okay, that has a good hechsher, at the wrong time, God will not protect the tzaddik. In other words, it's possible that a tzaddik will forget that it's Yom Kippur and he may eat.
How many tzaddikim we have now?
I don't know. I can't answer that question.
We have?
Definitely. We have. Every generation has tzaddikim.
What about in the generation of Purim in Shushan? Did anybody stay away from the Suda, or they didn't have tzaddikim like that?
No, we don't find that Achashur served anything treif. Everything was kosher in the Mahadran.
Yain Nesach.
Maybe not. We don't find that as Yain Nesach. Mordechai, the Gemara tells us, was the butler. Maybe the reason why is to avoid that problem. Or maybe it was Mavushal. We don't find that, even the Gemara says that Esther was fed, Kidli the Chaziri, the Gemara says, she was fed fatty bacon hogs. Tosfos says, Chas v'shalom, she never ate them. That's what she was fed, but she didn't eat it. Okay? So that's what that's what Tosfos is saying. Tosfos is establishing the following rule. The Gemara tells us God does not allow tzaddikim to stumble. Tosfos says only in regarding to food, and then Tosfos further clarifies it. Only food that is inherently problematic, but not food that is inherently okay at the wrong time. So we have to understand, what is Tosfos saying? Why would God only protect tzaddikim from eating trei food, but He wouldn't protect a tzaddik from eating on Yom Kippur? I mean, which is worse? Which is a worse sin? To eat treif or to eat on Yom Kippur?
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur. If you eat on Yom Kippur, you chayav kares, right? You're liable to the death penalty, bidei shamayim. If you eat treif, there's no death penalty. So what's Tosfos saying? God will only protect tzaddikim from eating something inherently problematic, but not eating food which is kosher at the wrong time? I mean, in Brisk, they would say the difference, if you would want to define the difference between eating something inherently problematic and eating something that is okay at the wrong time, one is what we call Isser Gavra, one is Isser Chefza. Something which is treif, the problem is with the item itself. And that's where Tosfos says God will protect the tzaddikim. As opposed to eating on Yom Kippur, there's no Isser on the Chefza, there's no Isser on the item. It's merely a superimposed prohibition where you can't eat that. But that item is not inherently flawed. And that's what we have to understand. But what's the difference? Why will God only protect the tzaddik from eating something inherently problematic and not eating something which is okay at the wrong time? We come to the Mesilas Yesharim. And the Mesilas Yesharim tells us something very important. By the way, mentioned many times that Reb Chaim Volozhiner writes, Kol Hasfarim Kodesh, all works of Musar are holy. Mesilas Yesharim Kodesh Kadashim. Right? If you're stranded on a desert island with only one book, you could make a case that if you had one book to select, you could make a strong case for the Mesilas Yesharim. Okay. Says the Mesilas Yesharim. We have a principle. The Torah tells us in this week's Parsha, Parsha Shmini, which we're going to learn after Pesach, Hashem, it says, Lo sitamu bahem, don't be defiled by eating forbidden food. Vinit meisem bam. Says the Gemara, don't read it, vinit meisem, you will become defiled. Ella vinitamtem. It will clog you up. Right? You know, if you have too many French fries, right, what's going to happen to the arteries? It clogs it. Fashed up. Right? It clogs it up. So too, if you sin, when a person sins, any sin, whether it's Lashon Hara, whether it's Shatnez, whether it's eating tray food, whatever the sin may be, it clogs up the spiritual heart. What does that mean, it clogs up the heart? God gave a person a certain capacity to understand Hashem. Hashem gave us the ability to see Hashem in this world, to understand Hashem in this world, to understand the truths of the Torah. By sinning, you're clouding your vision, you're clouding your perception. Maybe you're not going to understand the truths of this world, you're not going to understand the truth of what life is all about. That's what it means that sin clogs up the heart. Says the Mesilas Yesharim, while all sin clogs up the mind and clogs up the neshama, there is one sin that clogs up the neshama and the mind more than any other sin. What is it? Forbidden food. Why? Why? What's the difference? Why, even more than desecrating Shabbos? We know if somebody desecrates Shabbos, they're chayiv skila. If somebody eats a piece of pig, they're not chayiv misa. So why are we saying that by eating forbidden food, it clogs up the mind more than any other sin? Says the Mesilas Yesharim. Because when you eat forbidden food, you ingest it into your body. You ingest it, you then digest it, and you recompose the food, and the food becomes you. So you are now made out of a davar tameh. Your body, your nefesh, your ramach evarim, your entire entity consists and has been created from a davar tameh. So while it is true that the devastation that you cause to yourself when you desecrate Shabbos is great, and in a way it's much greater than eating forbidden food, but there's a certain element of eating forbidden food that no sin can compare to. Yeah, because when you sin in action, if someone desecrates the Shabbos, it's outside, it's external, it's something you do. But when you eat something treif, you eat bishul, even something d'Rabbanan, bishul akum, yayin esach. By the way, talking about yayin esach, you have to be very careful. The night of Pesach, the halacha is that someone who is not Shomer Shabbos, who picks up a bottle of wine, and the wine is not mevushal, it becomes yayin nesach. So you have to be very careful. If you're going to have at the Seder people who are not keeping Shabbos, get your own bottle of wine. Don't let anyone touch it, or use yayin mevushal, cooked wine. Okay? But otherwise, the wine becomes yayin nesach, and we could discuss some of the specifics of it. But it's very important. Yayin esach is an isser. Okay. So by eating forbidden foods, now, by the way, I'm just going to give a certain idea that I want to throw out. And that is, when we hear this type of idea, if, sometimes people may have in the past done things or eaten things without being educated as to the proper halacha of what can be eaten and what cannot be eaten. The purpose of learning about this is not for a person to feel guilty about things that they may have done, because Chassam Sofer writes, there's always tshuva. If a person ate something that was davar asar, Chassam Sofer says you could do tshuva. Chassam Sofer even writes, if a person does tshuva me'ahava, out of love of Hashem, so the davar tameh that a person may have eaten is transformed into a zechus, into a mitzvah. Says the Chassam Sofer, even today it's possible to eat the Karban Pesach. How? If a person ate a davar tameh, and then they do tshuva me'ahava, which zechus does it turn into? It's like achilas Karban Pesach. Some surface. Okay? Okay, but that's just a side point.
Pardon me. If someone eat taref,
Yeah.
he do teshuvah.
Of course.
Hashem going to forgive him?
Not only forgive him, it will be turned into a mitzvah. You do tshuva me'ahava, it's turned into a mitzvah.
Because you fought that sin, it's like you really sacrifice your will.
Yeah.
You actually resist that.
Tshuva works on anything. And all the ramifications that we're saying could be reversed. Right? Tshuva could reverse anything. Okay, but that's not the point. So Mesilas Yesharim is telling us that while all sin clogs the mind and clogs the neshama and clogs the heart, no sin can compare in terms of its ability to defile and corrupt the entire entity of a person than forbidden foods. Okay? Says Mesilas Yesharim. Look at the words he says. V'hamachalos, the underlined part. Ho'asuros, yeseros bazeh al kol ho'isurim. Forbidden food surpasses all sin in its ability to affect the heart of a person. Why? Kivan shehem nechnasim begufay shel adam. Because they enter the body. Mamash. In reality, b'nasim basar mi basari. They become part of your flesh. In other words, you could look at someone who has ingested a davar tameh. It's not just he sinned. His entire entity has been recreated from the davar tameh. Says the Mesilas Yesharim, the way a Jew should envision forbidden foods is that a person should consider it like poison. For instance, let's say a person, he's not sure, is this a good hechsher? Is this not a good hechsher? Is this kosher? Is this not kosher? You should judge based on the following criteria. If somebody would bring you a meal and they would say, you know what? It's probably not poison. You know? There's a small chance, there's 15% chance that there's arsenic in it. So would you eat it?
Never.
No. What if somebody went to the restaurant and they said, in one of the 1,000 meals that we serve tonight, we're not sure which meal it is. If you eat it, you're going to drop dead. But it's probably not this one. Anyone eating it?
No.
No. Says Mesilas Yesharim, if anyone has any doubt at all about the kashrus of something, the criteria that should be the barometer is, what if the possibility of it not being kosher was it being poison? Says Mesilas Yesharim, Af iser hamaychol kvar beyarnu shuhu eres mamosh lelev. It is poison to the heart, v'nefesh ha-Yisraeli. Okay? So what we're learning is, while eating on Yom Kippur, or desecrating Shabbos, or murder is in a way a lot worse than eating forbidden foods, but in its capacity to change the nature of a Jew, nothing can compare to the ingestion of forbidden food. Based on the Mesilas Yesharim, I think the words of Tosfos are very obvious. Why would God protect the tzaddik from eating a forbidden food and not protect the tzaddik from eating on Yom Kippur? It's obvious. If a tzaddik eats on Yom Kippur, there's nothing wrong with what he's ingesting. There's nothing wrong about the piece of herring he's eating. It's just he's not allowed to eat it now. So the tzaddik eats it, it goes into his system. His body now, the herring has turned into the tzaddik. It's not a problem. It's an avera, but it's not corrupting the makeup of the tzaddik. But if the tzaddik thought he was eating something from Carlos and Gabby's, and it turned out to be McDonald's, so this egg and cheese, this ham sandwich is now turning into the tzaddik. Right? It's becoming his heart, it's becoming his basar, it's becoming his limbs. That has the ability to corrupt the tzaddik more than anything else. And that probably is what Tosfos means, why God will protect the tzaddik from eating something inherently forbidden, and not eating something which is inherently permissible at the wrong time. Okay, does that make sense? Yeah, okay, I think that's pretty logical. Okay, so what we're learning is that something that is inherently forbidden has a certain capacity to completely change the makeup of a person.
But how does tshuva on a physical level will change the makeup of the person, whoever is prayed?
How does it do it?
Yeah.
This is We don't understand how tshuva works, right? Like the Medrash says, they asked Nevi'im, what should a person do if he sins? He should die. They asked the Torah, what should he do? Bring a carbon. They asked Chachma, what should be done? That's the end of him. Only they asked Hashem, Hashem said do tshuva. That means not the Nevi'im, not the Chachamim, not even the Chumash itself can understand the concept of tshuva. Only Hashem understands. How it works, we don't know. We don't know exactly how it works. Mesilas Hashem offers a rationale for it, but it works. Tshuva works. Okay, so one more time. When Tosfos says that God protects the tzaddikim only from forbidden food, the understanding is because forbidden food is ingested by the person, it becomes part of his makeup, it changes the character, as opposed to eating permissible food at the wrong time. I believe now we can understand what the Chassam Sofer means. Chassam Sofer says that nowadays there's only one mitzvah that we have that involves eating. Eating matzah. What's the Chassam Sofer mean? What about eating on Erev Yom Kippur? What about eating in the sukkah? What about eating on Shabbos? The answer is, eating in the sukkah? What are you eating? The piece of challah? There's nothing intrinsically holy about eating about this piece of challah. It's a regular piece of bread. It's just that there's a mitzvah to eat this challah in the sukkah. So the item that you are ingesting, while it's a mitzvah, has no intrinsic holiness, has no intrinsic mitzvah quality. You are performing a mitzvah. There's no difference between eating in the sukkah and doing any other mitzvah in terms of what is entering your system. There's no difference, let's say eating on Erev Yom Kippur. What are you eating? You're eating whatever it is. You're eating your soup, you're eating your gefilte fish, you're eating your chicken. Each item of food that you're eating, there has no intrinsic mitzvah value. It's just it happens to be that there's a superimposed mitzvah that one should eat at this time. Or to eat on Shabbos. Nothing holy about this challah as opposed to a different challah. It's just that when Shabbos comes, it's a time to eat. However, matzah, it is an item that God has selected that this is something that we need to ingest in our bodies. Which means, the same way, when a person eats forbidden food, no sin can compare to the way this forbidden food enters his system and corrupts his system and becomes part of him and changes his whole makeup. The same thing when it comes to matzah. We have no mitzvah in the Torah where not only are we performing the mitzvah, we're doing the mitzvah, but we actually ingest the matzah. And the matzah enters our system, and it turns into who we are. It completely sanctifies and uplifts and elevates our makeup, because this is an item that God has specifically commanded. This item needs to be in us. The same way that God protects the tzaddik not to eat something that is intrinsically forbidden, because that's something that can completely change his makeup. The Chassam Sofer writes, nowadays, we have only one mitzvah, one time a year, to actually ingest a cheptzah shel mitzvah, right? You put on tefillin, you're wrapping it around your arm. You put on your talis, you're wrapping it over you. Matzah is the only mitzvah we do where it actually enters our body. We ingest, we digest, and then it recomposes and to make us up who we are. According to most Rishonim, only the first night. The Vilna Gaon actually writes that every kazayas of matzah you eat on Pesach is another mitzvah saseh daraisa, but that's a machlokas.
Building yourself up.
So according to the Vilna Gaon, it would be the whole Pesach, and according to others, it would only be the first night. Yeah?
Two questions. First question is, why don't we say that when, let's say, a person eats a morsel of food out of the sukkah, that's the equivalent of tarfus?
Because there's nothing inherently problematic with the food that you're eating.
Yeah, the food that you're eating is eaten out of the sukkah.
No, the food you're eating there's nothing problematic with it. It's where you're eating it, but there's nothing inherently problematic with the actual food.
It says eating the food in the sukkah. If you eat the food out of the sukkah, take the food.
No, there it's
As
just
you put it in your mouth,
it's a question of
raining,
location.
It's fine.
There's nothing inherently problematic with that food. No, no.
The food's tainted.
No, the food's not tainted.
Sure it is.
You're tainted for eating that.
And the food's tainted.
No.
Why not?
If you don't make a bracha,
it's not an issue.
if you don't make a bracha, does the food count?
No.
And second question.
Yeah.
So when you eat,
It's like eating before Havdalah. Like Tosa said, Hashem won't protect the tzaddik from eating before Havdalah because the food you're eating is not inherently flawed. No, it's Drabanan.
But sukkah is the rice.
Hashem will let us tzaddik eat chametz on Pesach.
Correct, yeah.
It says sukkahs.
Correct.
Isn't sukkah the rice?
Yeah.
That would equate. It's the rice. That was the drop.
Yeah, but Tosis doesn't feel that it's a chiluk.
Prices equates.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Second question.
Let's move on. Yeah.
Second question. I don't understand. When it becomes part, please explain what it becomes part of it. What does that mean?
What are you made of? You're made of cells. What creates the cells? The food that you eat. Right? You eat meat, it breaks it down into protein, amino acids, that creates the cells in your body. Right? So therefore, by eating, ingesting a davar tameh, you are recomposing your body made out of something that is defiled. As opposed to when you just do an avera, you acted wrong, but you didn't create yourself out of what we call something that is spiritually defiled. Okay? So matzah is the one opportunity that we have to basically recreate ourselves out of matter which is a davar kadosh. And I would like to suggest, this perhaps is another reason why we have to eat the matzah b'te'avon, with an appetite. Why? Because if the purpose of the matzah, according to the Chassam Sofer, is the matzah is what is creating our chiyos, our life, our whole life force, so the more hungry we are, and the more desire we have to eat the matzah, the more koach the matzah is giving us, the more chiyos, the more energy, the more we are recreating ourselves with the matzah. Okay. Let us move on very quickly. Let's move on very quickly. Okay. We're going to do a lamdisha segment of the shiur, but we're going to have to do it very quickly. Okay? The Sefer HaChinuch writes that the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, right? One of the mitzvahs d'oraisa that we have the night of Pesach is Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, relating the events of Mitzrayim. Says the Sefer HaChinuch, women are obligated in the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim. Asks the Minchas Chinuch, why? Why in the world should women be obligated in Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim? It's a mitzvah saseh shehazman and grama. It's governed by time. Women are not chayiv in sukkah. They're not chayiv in lulav. They're not chayiv in shofar. Why would they be chayiv in Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim? And it's true they're chayiv in matzah, but that's only because anyone who's not to eat chametz has to eat matzah. But why should women be chayiv in Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim? So you may say, how you what?
I don't understand what you mean. The woman is...
Women are obligated in the midst of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, saying the Haggadah. And the question is why? Maybe you'll say, Rabbi Glatstein, I'm not going to be able to take questions. We're just going to finish up very quick, okay? The question is why? Why should women be chayiv? So you say, well, they also left Mitzrayim. Af heim hayu ba'oso hanes. But if you remember from last week, the concept of af heim hayu ba'oso hanes does not obligate people in mitzvahs d'oraisa, only on mitzvahs d'rabbanan. So why would women be chayiv in the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim? Okay, that's the question of the Minchas Chinuch. Okay, let us come momentarily to Hallel, the night of Pesach. Okay, right? Everybody knows we say Hallel, the night of Pesach.
Right.
There are major problems with the Hallel we say the night of Pesach. Number one, you're not allowed to say Hallel at night. You're not allowed to say Hallel at night. We have a drush, the Gemara Megillah Darshans, Mi Mizrach Hashemesh Ad Mevoyoi Mehulel Shem Hashem. You're only allowed to say Hallel from the rising of the sun to the setting of the sun. You're not allowed to say Hallel at night. So how can we say Hallel the night of Pesach? Number two, why do we not make a bracha on Hallel the night of Pesach? It's a mitzvah. The Gemara Darshans it. The Gemara Nerchen Darshans it from Leil Hiskadesh HaChag. It's a mitzvah to say Hallel the night of Pesach. Why do we not make a bracha on Hallel the night of Pesach? Question number three, imagine if you came to shul on a Rosh Chodesh, and in the middle of Hallel, a guy comes, he takes out his salami sandwich, he puts ketchup on it, he puts his pickle on it, he takes out Coca-Cola, and he starts having a Suda in the middle of Hallel. Yeah, you kick him out of shul, what are you doing? But that's what we do the night of Pesach. In the middle of Hallel, we interrupt the Hallel, we have Shulchan Aruch, we set the table, and we have a whole big meal. How are we allowed to do that? No other time, any other time of the year, if anyone would do that, then that would be the end of him, you know? And the night of Pesach, we eat in the middle of the Hallel. And question number four is, we are obligated to say Hallel standing. Right? Ha'oimdim b'beis Hashem ha'leilos. Right? Rabbi said halazah.
A bracha also, no?
What?
A bracha also, how?
Bracha. Yeah, that was right. We asked, why don't we make a bracha now? But these are the questions we're asking. Number one, the night of Pesach. How are we allowed to say Hallel at night? How are we allowed to say Hallel without a bracha? How are we allowed to eat in the middle of Hallel? How are we allowed to eat Hallel, say Hallel sitting down?
Right.
The Gemara Pesachim tells us the following. We know that matzah is called lechem oini. Right? Literally the bread of poverty, the bread of affliction. Says the Gemara Pesachim, Amar Shmuel, lechem oini means lechem she'oinim olav dvarim harbe. Bread that you talk about a lot. Bread that you talk about. That's what lechem oini is. Lechem oini is not the poor man's bread. Lechem oini is bread that you talk about. Says Rashi, what are you saying about it? Rashi says two things. Hallel, Haggadah. The definition of matzah, says the Gemara, is lechem oini, bread that you talk about. What are you saying? Says Rashi, if you look at number 16, bread that you are gomer the Hallel, and bread that you say the Haggadah over. In other words, what the Gemara seems to be saying is that the definition of matzah is not just food. In order to fulfill the criteria of matzah, you need to talk about the matzah. What do you need to say? Hallel, Haggadah. So it comes out that if somebody would not say Hallel the night of Pesach, not only would he not get the mitzvah of Hallel, he won't get the mitzvah of matzah either. It comes out if somebody would not say the Haggadah the night of Pesach, not only is he not mekayim the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, he's not mekayim the mitzvah of matzah, because part of the mitzvah of matzah is the Hallel and is the Haggadah. So, many Sfarim point out, it's brought down in the Sefer Oros HaPesach by Rabbi Warman, and others also. We'll see the Stipler takes this idea further even, that what we're learning from here is that the mitzvah of Hallel, the night of Pesach, is not a mitzvah of Hallel. The mitzvah of Hallel is part of the mitzvah of matzah. Right? In other words, if somebody doesn't say Hallel the night of Pesach, he has not fulfilled the mitzvah of matzah. The definition of matzah is bread that you say Hallel over.
But also, you're allowed to read Tehillim on Friday night, right? On Shabbos, you're allowed to read Tehillim, even at night.
Yeah.
Right? Friday night, you're allowed to read
Ashkenazim say the whole year. We say Tanakh.
So Friday night, it's okay to say Tehillim. Friday at night, we don't recommend to say Tehillim. It's not. But Friday night, you can do it. And Hallel, it's all the parts of the Tehillim.
No, but as Tefillah, everyone agrees that even Sfaradim who don't say Tehillim, they agree you could say in Tefillah, you could say even Tehillim any night of the year. Okay, so Hallel is part of the mitzvah of matzah. In other words, it comes out, if someone has not said Hallel the night of Pesach, he has not fulfilled the mitzvah of matzah. And therefore, the reason why we're allowed to say Hallel at night, even though normally we're not allowed to say Hallel at night. The reason why we're allowed to say Hallel sitting, even though normally you're not allowed to say Hallel sitting. The reason we don't need to make a bracha on Hallel, even though we always do. The reason we're allowed to eat in the middle of Hallel, even though we're ordinarily not allowed to, is because Hallel, the night of Pesach, is not an independent mitzvah. It is part of the mitzvah of matzah. And therefore, the laws of Hallel do not govern the Hallel that we say the night of Pesach. The laws of Matzah govern the Hallel that we say the night of Pesach. And therefore, right? Okay, so that explains why the Hallel that we're saying the night of Pesach is different than Hallel the rest of the year. It is not governed by the laws of Hallel. It is governed by the laws of Matzah. It's part of the mitzvah of Matzah. Additionally, part of the mitzvah of Matzah is, like Rashi says, Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, Haggadah. Haggadah. In other words, if someone eats matzah and they don't say the Haggadah, they have not only not fulfilled the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim, they have not fulfilled the mitzvah of matzah either. So it comes out, says the Stipler, that the reason why women are chayiv in the mitzvah of Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim is because women are chayiv in matzah, not because women have an independent obligation to recite the Haggadah. Really, the Minchas Chinuch is right. Women should inherently be pater on Sipur Yitzias Mitzrayim because it is a mitzvah governed by time. And really, women are pater from the mitzvah of Higadet ala bincha. Men are obligated in Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim. Women would be pater if not for the fact that the Torah obligates women in Matzah, and part of the mitzvah of Matzah is Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim.
Where do we know that the woman are chayav in matzah?
Because we have a drasha, anyone who's not allowed to eat chametz is allowed to eat matzah. Why do I bring this in? Why do I bring this in? Because we explained, based on the Chassam Sofer, there's only one mitzvah that we have the entire year where we don't just perform the mitzvah, we actually ingest the mitzvah. Where the mitzvah goes into our system, we ingest it, we digest it, and it recomposes our makeup. So based on what we're saying, this is not just bread that we're ingesting. This is lechem oini. What's lechem oini? Lechem oini is bread that you talk about, which means everything that we say the night of Pesach, all the words of Emunah, all the words of Sipur Yitzis Mitzrayim, or the Hallel, all of the events that will relate, all the Emunah and Bitachon that we talk about, is inherently part of the matzah on the table. That's what matzah is. Matzah is lechem oini. Matzah is not just bread. Matzah is bread that you talk about, and everything we say the night of Pesach is part and parcel of the item of matzah, and that all is ingested by us, right? We put it into our system, we digest it, and it makes up who we are. Okay, one more step, okay? One more step. We're going to say one piece over from the Shem Yishmael. Shem Yishmael wants to know, we know Adam HaRishon, before the sin, right? What happened when Adam HaRishon sinned? When Adam HaRishon ate from the Eitz Hadas, Chazal tell us the Yetzer Hara went inside of him. The Yetzer Hara went into his body. So the Shem Yishmael asks, well, what does that mean? That means before he sinned, he didn't have the Yetzer Hara. So if he didn't have the Yetzer Hara, so then how did he sin? Right? I mean, if by eating from the Eitz Hadas, the Yetzer Hara went into him, that means before he ate from the Eitz Hadas, he didn't have the Yetzer Hara. If he didn't have the Yetzer Hara, why would he sin? So the answer is obvious. That he didn't have the Yetzer Hara inside of him. He had the Yetzer Hara outside of him. As he sinned, the Yetzer Hara went into him. Says the Shem Yishmael, where is the Yetzer Hara now? It's inside the person, right? Like the Gemara says, Vayia lecha el zar. What is the foreign god that we have inside of us? The Yetzer Hara. Says the Gemara in Brachos, where is the Yetzer Hara located? Al shnei miftachei halev. Now we've sinned so much that the Yetzer Hara not only is inside of us, but it's really near the heart. Says the Shem Yishmael, the more a person sins, the closer the Yetzer Hara gets to the inner core of the Jew. In other words, at first the Yetzer Hara was completely external. As we sinned, more and more and more the Yetzer Hara entered deeper, deeper, deeper into what the inner core of a Jew is. The inner core is the Neshama HaYechida. The inner core is the Nekuda HaPnimis, the inner core of a Jew. Is it possible for the Yetzer Hara to enter that inner core? Only if you fall to the 50th level of Tumah. And if that happens, that's the point of no return. And therefore Hashem didn't want that to happen in Mitzrayim. So as the Yetzer Hara was entering inside the lave of the Jew, Hashem said, Ad kan v'sulo, you cannot enter any further. In other words, as a person sins, he draws the Yetzer Hara closer, closer, closer to his inner core. Okay? But Hashem would not allow the Yetzer Hara to enter the most inner sanctum of the Jew, and therefore he took us out in time. Says the Shem Yishmael, which mitzvah did Hashem give us to ensure that the Yetzer Hara would not enter the most inner sanctum of the Jew? He gave us the mitzvah of Matzah. Now the Shem Yishmael explains how the mitzvah of Matzah protects us from the Yetzer Hara entering the deepest recess of the heart. But we're going to suggest a different approach. Okay, again, what we're saying tonight is, based on the Chassam Sofer, is that the one mitzvah we have the entire year that we ingest and enters our system and becomes part of us and creates who we are is the Matzah. We find in Parshas Vayera, Avraham Avinu says to Malachim, V'sadu libchem, satisfy your heart. Right? Ve'ekcha pas lachem, I'll give you bread. V'sadu libchem, and satisfy your heart. Says Rashi. In 3 places, in the Torah, in the Nevi'im, and in the Ksuvim, we find that bread satisfies the heart. In the Chumash, V'sadu libchem. In the Navi, and in the Ksuvim, right? V'lechem levav enosh yesod. Says Rashi. There are 3 places in Tanakh where we find that bread satisfies the heart. So always bothered by this Rashi. Who cares what this is such a fundamental principle, that bread satisfies the heart, that we need to repeat it in the Chumash, and again in the Navi, and again in the Ksubah. I mean, who cares whether bread satisfies the heart or doesn't satisfy the heart? But I think what we learn from here is a very important Nakuda, and it's very relevant to what we're saying. Says based on the Shem Mishmua, as the Jews were sinking lower and lower and lower in Mitzrayim, what was happening with the Yetzer Hara? The Yetzer Hara that used to be external on the Jew, used to be on the outside and entered, and now is entering the inner sanctum of the heart, and is about to hit the Nekuda Hapnimis of the Jew, is about to fall to the 50th level of Tumah, where the most inner sanctum of the heart is affected. So which mitzvah does God give us? There's only one item that by eating it, it is able to hit the lave of a person. We don't find that basar is sa'ad halev, satisfies the heart. We only find that by one item. Lechem, bread. Bread is the one item that we find in Tanakh. It's sa'ad as halev. It's able to nourish the heart. Again, the Shem Mishmor is telling us that we were in danger of the Yetzer Hara entering the most inner sanctum of the lave. So what does Hashem give us? Hashem gives us the mitzvah of Matzah. That is the one mitzvah that we have the entire year. It's not just we perform the mitzvah. The mitzvah, the chefza shel mitzvah, as Chassam Sofer says, enters our body. We ingest it. And it's something that is able to have a positive influence and elevate and uplift even the Lev HaYisrael. This was the antidote to the Matzah in Mitzrayim. This was the antidote to the situation that was happening. And that's why today, even today, as we relive the experience of Mitzrayim, and we say, Maschel b'gnusu Masayim b'shvach, on the night of Pesach, we're imagining as if we're on the 49th level of Tumah, we've sunk to the lowest level, we have the mitzvah of Matzah, the one mitzvah, the Chassam Sofer says, the one mitzvah we have left. We don't have Kachim, we don't have Meiser, we don't have Truma. It's the one time the entire year. We don't just sit in the sukkah. We don't just put on the tefillin. We actually take the chefza shel mitzvah. We ingest it. It enters our system. It's broken down. And as we eat it b'teyavon, that's why you have to eat it b'teyavon, it gives us a new life force. It recreates our entire makeup. And it's brought down in many svarim. The matzah, all the mitzvos that we have, we do the entire year, is the driving force. Is the matzah we eat the night of Pesach, because it's a one time a year where we're able to recreate our makeup based on the mitzvah. I wish everyone a Chag Kosher v'Sameach. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.